Hi everyone, this is Nathan from Snap and welcome to another of our Snap XMP webinars. Today we're going to be looking at how the data from your paper questionnaires and forms can be scanned into the software, avoiding the need for manual data entry. It should take about 45 to 50 minutes today, which is a little longer than originally advertised, but I promise you there is some good stuff to show you today, which will really help those that are going to be looking to use the scanning module. As ever, there's plenty of resources available on our support hub, which we'll be pointing you to at the end. And if you do need to shoot off before the end, I will be making a recording of this available on our website in the next day or so. First of all, we'll take a look at the scanning templates supplied with Snap XMP, highlighting some of the inbuilt features. We'll go through some of the important do's and don'ts of a scanning survey, ensuring your project runs as smoothly as possible. I'll be using a variety of surveys, including questionnaires set up as single page, multiple page, duplex surveys, and also printed as booklets. While scanning is ideal for questionnaires which are predominantly made up of checkbox style questions, nearly all projects are going to have at least one open style question. So to try and mitigate poorly written responses, we're going to look to include some patterns for expected responses and also pre-printed text where information is already known. Finally, I'll be taking you through an example of scanning in a survey which was designed outside of Snap. And along the way, I'll be pointing out a few things for you to consider as you go about setting up a scanning project. Few key benefits to using scanning to collect your data. The obvious one being that it saves you having to manually key in your paper surveys, with the scanning in of checkbox data in particular being far quicker. The software is able to detect where a respondent has changed their mind and crossed out an answer, and also able to rotate pages that have been scanned in upside down and ignore responses that have been given to questions which should have been skipped over. Errors are also flagged up for further inspection. So things such as selecting more than one answer to a single response question or choosing more answers than the maximum allowed. Open-ended questions also checked for validity. This could be an answer which could be out of bounds based on the criteria set up for that question, or perhaps where the scanner hasn't correctly read in the handwritten text. Okay, let's head into the software and look at how some of your projects might be set up. Going to be working in the webinars folder today, and we're going to be looking at initially the scanning template that is supplied with Snap. So I'm going to create a brand new survey, and I'll just give that, making use of the scanning template, and I'll give that a name of scanning demo. Now, the majority of our templates create multiple editions of a survey, including the 3 online editions for a PC or laptop, a tablet and a phone, as well as the 4th edition, which is the paper survey. But when producing a survey which is going to be scanned, we very much recommend having a survey which is dedicated to scanning rather than having it running alongside any online editions. The reason being that we need to be really careful not to make any amendments to that version of the survey which has been sent out to your respondents. If you've got your online survey running alongside your scanning project, then you're more likely to accidentally change something in the paper edition when making adjustments to your online editions. The scanning template also differs from our others in that it has some instructional text built into it for the respondents. So this text here and the images and things, these can all be updated and edited and deleted if you don't want them there. But they will hopefully encourage your respondents to fill the questionnaire in correctly. And we've also got some additional question styles built into the scanning template. So if I drop down the menu, so we have our normal open-ended question styles, but we've also got gridded versions of these. Same for, we've got some open style sort of series ones where we're expecting a number of sort of open question text. But as I said, because we're looking at scanning, we can also look at the gridded versions. Now, these open style grids, they're great when you're expecting shorter passages of text. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that if you're expecting a sort of full-on open-ended comment question where you're perhaps expecting sort of a couple of sentences, maybe even a paragraph, because if nothing else, you're probably likely to put off the person giving a response in the first place. Now, rather than typing up a survey from scratch, I'm going to jump out of this survey and into one I've prepared already. So I'm going to start off with a really nice simple one-page survey. And in fact, all the surveys we're looking at today, they're quite sort of simple in design, and in part that's to keep the main focus on how we actually scan things into Snap, but also when designing a survey for scanning, the simpler the better, really. Ultimately, you can make them more colourful with background shading and adding in your logos, but you just need to be really careful that it doesn't get in the way of the software seeing the boxes when the questionnaires are scanned back in. So it's really a case of making sure that you fully test anything before you send it out to your audience. Now, looking at this questionnaire, I'm making use of some grid questions for the if other please specify. We've also got, as I said, for the general comment question, I've not got that as a gridded box. We've got some routing or some skipping over going on where we don't want people to answer certain questions based on how they're responding. And the survey's also been set up in terms of response. So can they choose a single option or multiple options? Can they type in words? Are we looking for sort of numbers or dates, etc.? Now, if I run a quick preview, first of all, you can see we've got some sort of grayed out text here telling us that the survey is just in draft mode. It needs publishing, and publishing really means locking down. But you can see there's also a number of suggestions on the left-hand side of how we might be able to improve the detection rate of the data. Now, at the moment, this survey is spread over 2 pages, and one of the comments is that on the second page, I move to the second page, that there aren't any tick boxes on that page. Now, when a piece of paper gets fed through a scanner, there's always a chance that it might end up being fed through slightly wonky, and the software, will then try and wiggle the image to try and straighten it up again. And it uses the tick boxes on a page to do this. The problem is on page 2 there currently aren't any tick boxes, so it can't really do that. So the options are to either put some tick boxes on that page or alternatively use locator blocks. Now, locator blocks are turned on under page setup, and you've got headers and footers, so we can just turn those on. And what that will actually do is just pop a box in each of the corners. So you can see there's 4 little black dots in the corners of each page, and Snap will then use those to effectively do the wiggling in the background. But personally, I don't tend to use these because they look a bit ugly if nothing else, but also there's always a danger that they may well get ripped off because they're up in the corners, and then suddenly you're going to lose one of those important positioning tools. So I'm going to turn those back off. Now, you can also see we've got some comments saying about patterns for our open-ended questions. So let's have a look and see what we can do to make this survey more streamlined in terms of the accuracy when things get scanned back in again. So I'm going to cancel out of here. So looking at some of the suggestions, if we look at the questionnaire design window, and if we look at question 3 to begin with, or 3A, so I'm going to right click on this question, go into variable properties, and down the bottom we've got patterns and scanning validation. I'm going to set this to spelling and click OK. Now here Snap's going to look at the characters that gets typed in and try and detect it. Now once that's done, it will look at the letters and then try and use the dictionary to build a word. Now I'm going to try and just pop into a different screen just to try and explain a bit more about what I mean here. You can see I have an example where the respondent has written the letters D, O, G at the top. Snap will look at the D and work out what it thinks is the most likely correct letter, and then it will keep making suggestions, so its second and third choice being sort of less and less likely options. So in my example, it's pretty sure it is a letter D, so that's its first option, but with a bit of a squint it could also be an A, and then possibly also an uppercase Q. The same with the O. Snap is pretty sure it's an O, but it could well be another A, and then it could be another uppercase Q. And then for the G, Snap's number one choice is a 9, with its second choice being a G and then a Q. And based on those three letters, it will then take an educated guess as to what was actually written. And if the word comes up using its number one choice, so using all of the top three letters, a D, O9, then it's going to just be happy and let you know. If, like in my example, it's found a mixture of the word using the mix of the first and second row, then it's going to get flagged up to me when we're cleaning our data at the later stage. If I head back into Snap. Now, for my general comment question, where I'm expecting sentences and maybe even paragraphs of text, I'm going to tell the system that I will manually key in this data. So again, if I go into variable properties, set that to keyed. So that means that I'm going to key it in rather than attempting to get Snap to try and work out what's going on. And realistically, it's probably quicker for me to key this question in rather than correct or check what Snap has come up with. For questions 7a and 7b, we're expecting some numbers. So I'm going to make use of the whole number pattern. And for question 8, the date question, it's already a date response question. But I'm going to make use of the decorated date pattern. And that will put the sort of slashes in for me. So let's now go back to fixing the fact that it's on 2 pages at the moment with that just one empty sort of open comment question on the last page. So if I do a quick print preview. So we could make use of the spacing. So I could sort of reduce that down to perhaps 10%. You can see that's brought it all onto the one page. But in doing so, that's squeezed everything up, which isn't great for scanning. Ideally, you want it as spaced out as possible. So I'm going to put that back to, but I'll just cancel out there. And instead, we're going to make use of columns in our survey. Now, if you remember, we were talking about the software giving the page a wiggle if it's gone into the scanner at a slightly different angle. So as mentioned, it's going to use locator blocks in the corner, or ideally, we're going to actually make use of the checkboxes. So if I look at question 1 and go to columns, we're just going to specify that's going to be 2 columns. And I'm going to do the same for the last tick box question. So ideally what we're trying to do is position a tick box as close to the corners as we can, really. And the idea being that as the surveys push through the scanner, as I said, the software will give it a wiggle. I'm sure that's not the term the developers use, but they will give it a wiggle to try and straighten up that piece of paper. So if I go back into the print preview, we can see it is now all on one page and we've got a nice spread of boxes. And as you can see, there's no longer any recommendations. Now, this is still just a draft, so we do need to publish the survey and then we can start sending the surveys out. So to publish it, I'll just come out of this window and we've got the publish icon. It takes us into pretty much the same window. The only difference is instead of a print button, we've now got publish. So I will just publish that one. Just going to replace that PDF on my desktop. Okay, so now the survey's published. It's also printed off a PDF, but what it's also done is effectively lock the survey down. So if I try and make an adjustment to the survey now, which would affect the position of boxes, the software is going to start shouting at me. Okay, so we have our PDF. This would then be obviously sent off to your printer to print some copies of the survey. And it's good practice to try and always use the same printer when printing, because all printers are slightly different. So if you print to different printers, you might find if you hold the piece of paper up to the light that the boxes are in ever such a slightly different position. So yeah, good practice to always print from the PDF, but also try and, if you can, use the same printer. So once the surveys have been sent out and returned, it's then time to start scanning them in. Now, today I'm going to be using some TIFFs. So I've got a folder here and I've got some TIFF files. Now, these have been produced by using a sort of multi-purpose photocopier. So the alternative is to scan directly using a scanner attached to your sort of PC or laptop. But if you are dealing with a larger quantity of paper, a larger multi-purpose sort of scanner and photocopier tends to be a lot more efficient. So these were sort of scanned in previously using that sort of big multi-purpose photocopier. But regardless of what you use to do your scans, there are a couple of important settings that need to be adhered to. The scanner needs to be set to produce a black and white, either a PDF or a TIFF. So today I've got TIFF files, but PDF would also work. The resolution, or the DPI, which stands for dots per inch, needs to be set to 300. So that's basically saying what the quality of that TIFF or PDF is going to be, but 300 DPI or 300 resolution is what you're looking for. So you should be able to sort of set those settings on your scanner. You can also be able to specify that you want what we call a multi-page TIFF or PDF. So in my example, I've got 10 completed surveys, but I've just got one file as opposed to 10 separate files. Okay, so again, just keeps it all nice and tidy. And just before we do jump in or jump out of this window, if I just zoom in, I've sort of done this on purpose to a certain extent. My scanner actually was a bit grubby, a bit dirty, had a bit of something on the plate, and effectively there's now a line all the way across. So you will see a bit later that in some circumstances this is going to cause a bit of an issue. So again, it's just really important we don't have any sort of marks on the scanner. But if I close that one down and just head back into Snap, we now need to start inputting these TIFFs. Now, in real life, before sending out your questionnaire to be filled in, you would want to do a calibration and do some testing of these completed surveys. Today, we're going to kind of do it all in one go. And to do that, we need to go into the data entry window. And to make sure that no one's been sort of messing around with the settings, we're just going to go straight into Tailor and Tailoring, or Scanning Tailoring. And there's a number of settings here, which we're just going to reset them all just to make sure nothing's sort of gone sort of strange in there. Generally, you wouldn't need to touch these. In fact, you are best using the default settings. Occasionally, you might need to tweak them if you're ever having any issues with sort of trying to scan in a paper survey, then it may well be that our support desk suggests making a couple of tweaks. But today, I'm just going to go into Input and just reset that. So input is dealing with how your paper's gone in, if it's gone in perhaps the wrong way, how basically will it be rotated, etc. If you've got a scanner directly plugged into your laptop, you'd be looking at the scanner section, but we're not doing that today. Again, that's where you'd be setting it to black and white and 300 DPI. OMR, OCR, this covers things like how much of a box needs to be scribbled out for Snap to recognise that it's a cross out, as in someone's giving an answer but then they've changed their mind, so crossed it out. And what do you want Snap to do if they've selected more than one answer when it was a single response question? And then Diskew is to do with the wiggling that we talked about. So when the image goes in, how much will it be wiggled, if you like? So again, just going to reset all these. And as I said, ideally don't want to be touching these unless you've got a good reason to. Certainly if you've scanned in your sort of surveys as you should do, if it's all gone in as they should do, then you shouldn't need to touch those. Okay, next we're going to run what we call a calibration. And this is where we're going to point the scanned image into Snap, and Snap's going to look at 4 points on each of the corners of the page. So if I press next, first thing we're going to look at is the sheet map. Now, this is a bit more relevant when we're talking about a larger survey, sort of booklets and things. So later on, we'll be talking about the different options in here, but I'm going to leave it on just basic today. And we're going to scan in an image as opposed to physically scanning it in with the scanner attached to my computer. So I'll go and get my TIFF file. And it's scanned in the image, or one of the images, one of the pages, and you can see it needs that calibration. So if I press next, And we basically need to read the little section at the top, but essentially it's clicking the boxes in the corner. So clicking on the yes, the box yes, click next, clicking on the mails, and I said if it's generally the ones in the corner, but it will occasionally catch you out. So for example, it's quite tempting just to not read this bit and click on no, but actually it's asking us for every day. And then the females. Okay, we can then click finish. And then once that's all done, we're ready to start scanning some live data in. As I said, in the real world, you'd want to ideally do this with some sort of test surveys. But we'll add some new data, so click on the plus. We're going to scan in new cases as opposed to kind of replace any case data that's in there already. And it's going to scan in as many cases as it finds in that TIFF file. If you did have a scanner physically attached to Snap now and you put in 5 pieces of paper, you'd probably want to put 5 in there. That way, if it only scanned in 4, as in it took 2 pieces at the same page at the same time because they were stuck together, then Snap would alert you to that. I'm going to go and select my file. There's my file. And Snap's automatically going to put a $sign at the end, or at the beginning actually, just to make sure that you don't accidentally scan that same file in sort of a second or third time. And click OK, and OK again. So you can see it's scanning in the images. And if I click OK, it's then going to detect what those images actually mean. And fingers crossed, it will detect 10 cases. And if I just do a very quick spot check, so you can see that case number 1 has ticked no, and there's a tick in the no. Case number 2 has clicked yes. So as I scroll through, you can see it is working, or it has worked. So ultimately, we could go straight away and do some analysis, but really what we want to do is get Snap to flag up any issues it might have found. And this is done using keying and cleaning. Now, just note that I did scroll back to case number 1, so it's going to start at case number 1. So we've got keying and cleaning. So in terms of keying, this will stop at questions where a pattern has either failed or where it's uncertain as to whether it's guessed correctly. So an example of this being the dog image that I showed you earlier. It will also stop at any questions which we told Snap that we would manually key in. So remember the comment question I said I was going to key in. So let's have a look and see where it stops today. So it's stopped on case number 1 on question number 7. It's just double checking, is that correct, which it is. So I'm just going to press enter. Again, it's going to jump to the sections it needs to jump to. So again, I'm just pressing enter once I can confirm that this is correct. This was one of the questions which I said I was going to manually key in, so I've just overtyped that. Again, just double checking that the picture on the left matches the data on the right. You can see it's doing a good job of picking up the sort of numbers and the dates. Okay, now for this one, it thinks the word is advent. I would suggest that's probably advert, so I'm just going to make that correction. Okay, so that's the keying complete. We're now run through the cleaning. Again, just popping back to case number 1, and this time looking at cleaning. So this will look at any questions which haven't been answered at all, which could be perhaps be where the mark that was made wasn't dark enough for the scanner to detect. So it might be that they were using pencil perhaps, or maybe they simply ticked but missed the actual box. Any questions where every answer have been given will be flagged up, and that could be correct, but it could be that the scanner has a mark on it, like we saw on my images earlier, or perhaps there's a dark sort of fold line, and that's produced a line that goes through some of the boxes. Where a respondent has ticked more than one answer to a single response question would also be flagged. Unrecognised is where it's completely failed to see that question at all for whatever reason, and errors is where a pattern match has failed. So again, let's see where it stops. So it stopped on case number 1 at question 5, and it's just saying confirm there's no reply to this question, so that is correct. It's then actually jumped all the way to case number 5, so it's found no other issues between case number 1 and 4. So it's just again confirming there's no response, which is correct. Again, no response. Here they've ticked male and female. I'm not sure what to tick there, so I'm just going to leave it as a no reply and enter. Obviously, if I could make a choice for certain questions, then you can select one of the boxes yourself. Again, a no reply, no reply, no reply, no reply. In this example, they've ticked every single answer. So is that correct? Yes, it is. Again, ticked every single answer. And then we are complete. So with keying and cleaning, you have got the option if you want to untick some of these options. So if you perhaps are expecting lots of no replies, then it can be quite annoying to have to kind of confirm that there are no replies. Likewise, if you're expecting lots of questions where they have ticked every answer, you could stop it flagging up those options. And indeed, you don't have to do any of the keying and cleaning. You could just go straight to analysis, but certainly I would recommend it. But yeah, once keying and cleaning is done, we're now ready to start analysing your data in the normal way. Just before we do move on, I did just want to highlight a few things which Snap has dealt with but not told you. So if we look at case number 3, looking at answer number 2, so they did actually tick weekly, but you can see Snap has ignored that because actually they should have gone straight from question 1 straight to question 3. So any questions where there's routing involved, it would have dealt with. If we look at question 4a, you can see they initially ticked OK, but then scribbled it out and clicked good. And again, Snap has recognised that. There's some other crossouts further down the line. And if we come and look at question 7a and 7b, just scroll through these, you can see Snap really doesn't care whether they make use of the first or second box. As long as they've written in that box somewhere, it will deal with it. Looking at case number 7, we have got a bit of an issue which Snap hasn't told us about. And this relates back to that sort of line on my scanner. So you can see that line for case number 7 has actually gone inside the box, and Snap has recognised that as a tick box. It hasn't for all the other ones. It's sort of it's just on the edges of the other ones, so it hasn't recognised it. But for case number 7, it's just gone inside the box. So that's the sort of thing which could get missed if you're not careful. So in my example, because this is on every single one, we're going to attempt to see if we can rectify that. It may, however, have a knock-on effect, because what I'm going to do is tell it to basically ignore the outermost edge of the box. Now, where that could go wrong is if you've got lots of people that aren't very good at ticking and they only tick the outside of the box. But if we go back into Taylor and scanning, I'm going to go into OMR OCR, and I'm going to specify that I want Snap to ignore, rather than just the 10% of the edge of the box, I'm going to get it to ignore 12%, so the uppermost 12% around the edges. And click OK. OK again. And what I'm actually going to do is scan in another 10. I could actually replace the first 10, but I've already done my cleaning on this, so I'm going to scan it in as another 10. You can see it has got that dollar sign there, but I'm going to scan that one in anyway. And hopefully if we look at case number 17, fingers crossed, it would have worked. Yep, so for case question number 3, you can see this time it has worked. Okay, let's now turn our attention to a longer survey that's been printed on both sides. So I'm going to take you into the TIFFs first of all. So again, it's a multi-page TIFF. Actually, again, contains 10 different filled-in surveys, but 20 pages as I scroll through. If we get to case number 4, you can see it's actually been put in upside down. Also, if I zoom in, you can see we got some printed office use only text at the top. So let's have a look at how we can set this up. Again, if I head back into Snap, I'll look at my duplex survey. Okay, so looking at my office use only question, if I go into the variable properties, this has been set to printed. So we told Snap that we're expecting printed text. And because it's printed, it's not in a gridded box this time. And in the background, I've got what's known as a database link. I'm not going to go into sort of how this was set up today, but basically there's a database link effectively pointing off to a spreadsheet with those reference numbers on. Now, I said I'm not going to go into how that's set up today, just because we don't have time, but I'll be pointing off to a worksheet at the end of today, which will take you to the relevant support page on that. Now, this one's called Office Use Only Import. The important bit is that we don't run this database link, because that would actually import and actually create data. Instead, we're going to go into data view mode, and we're effectively going to temporarily view it using panel data. You can see that's the name of that database link I just produced. And you can see that's produced, it looks like it's created 10 cases. It hasn't really, it's just sort of temporarily pulled them in just so you can then go to your preview, and then you can actually print your PDFs from here, including those reference numbers. Just make sure that you choose all filtered cases, otherwise it will only do that one page as opposed to the other sort of 10 cases that I've got. Okay. Now, as I come out of that window, effectively that data will be deleted. In fact, it was never really there anyway. So having sort of pre-printed text avoids the issues of the scanner attempting to read in poorly written handwriting, and then you having to sort of potentially clean that data. Let's move into data entry mode. So the key difference really is the sheet map. So if I right click and look at sheet map, you can see this time it's set to duplex. Now I'm going to go ahead and scan in those TIFFs. So again, you can see it says it needs to be calibrated. So we just go back and we will calibrate. So I said sheet map is going to be duplex, just confirming that it's going to be duplex. And if I press next, we go and get that duplex file. So 2 pages this time. So again, just clicking on the different boxes that we get told to click on. Then page 2. As I said, it's tempting just to sort of not read these, what it's asking for, but the danger is you're going to click on the wrong box in. Okay, and now we're ready to scan those in. So again, 10 cases, 20 pieces of paper, 20 sheets, sides. Okay, and again, bit of a spot check. You can see it's got the ABC 1, 2, 3. It's picked up that all correctly. You can also notice it was case number 4, which was upside down, but it's rotated that one. Okay, and then as before, the next step would be the keying and cleaning, but I'm not going to do that today. My final example today is an A5 booklet. So an A4 piece of paper folded in half. Now, if you are listening in from across the pond and wondering what A4 means, so A4 is very similar to your sort of letter size. So looking at page setup, it's A4, but the important bit is that we've got printer's booklet, so effectively A4 folded in half. If I do a print preview, if I move throughout the survey, you can see I've got a good spread of boxes making use of the sort of multiple columns. And if you look at my office use only question, this time we're expecting handwriting, so it is got the gridded boxes on there. But what I've also done is apply a pattern to it, and the office use only pattern. So this is a pattern which I've created myself. So you can go up to view patterns. Within here, there's all the patterns that we give you with the software, but you can also create your own. So I created one called office use only, where I'm expecting 2 letters followed by 3 digits. Now, again, not going to show you how you do that today, but if you go to our support hub and just type in the word pattern, and there's some worksheets on how to create your own patterns. Okay, in terms of scanning, go in. I said this one's already been published. I go into scanning, tailoring and calibrate. So in terms of the sheet map, the difference is that it's a book. And this is where you just need to be really quite careful when you're scanning things in, because it's a booklet, effectively you scan in page 4 first, followed by page 1, followed by page 2, followed by page 3. And generally, if I am assisting a customer who's having issues with booklets, it tends to be that they've just put the pages in back to front, so they may have put page 1 in first rather than page 4 in first. So yeah, as I said, you can see here is kind of the order you need to put it in. Okay, and if I press next, scan my booklet in. As I said, I've actually kind of already done this, so that's why they're already set to OK. But again, if I just start to calibrate page 1, which is effectively page 4, and this is where, again, you can tell if you've gone wrong, because if you've done this and it's asking for question 11, but it's only showing you question 1, then that would suggest you've sort of scanned in your piece of paper in the wrong order. But I'm going to cancel out of there anyway. Okay, I'll quickly scan in my TIFFs. And this time there's just 5 pages, or 5 completed surveys in this one. Again, you can see it's picked up my handwriting pretty well. Okay, so we looked at a few different scenarios in terms of layout and setup. Other things to consider when deciding if your project is going to be suitable for scanning include staples. So if you have got multiple pages like I've got now, and they are stapled, you're going to need to spend some time removing those. And you don't really just want to be ripping them off the corners, because it's more likely to cause your scanner to jam or end up going through the scanner just at a slightly funny angle. Another big consideration is the ratio of tick box style questions to comment questions and other literal response questions. As you've seen, you're going to need to hand key in your longer open-ended questions, and you will need to clean a certain amount of the shorter ones as well. But At the same time, if you are running a survey without scanning, you'd still have to manually key in those open-ended questions as well as keying in all the tick box questions. But as we've discussed, when designing a survey for scanning, you just need to be aware of how you design your survey to make it as optimized as you can in terms of accuracy for the scans. Okay, one final thing to show you, and that's that you have got the option of scanning in a survey which was designed outside of Snap. Now, you do still need to keep in mind the design considerations that we discussed today, but it does open up other opportunities in terms of outsourcing your design, or can be a useful fix if your survey that you sent out initially to all your respondents has now been changed and no longer matches the survey that you have in Snap. But either way, here we are taking a paper questionnaire or form that looks completely different to the form that exists in Snap. So you can see I've got my questionnaire here. Now, if I'm honest, I did actually build this in Snap, but that was just because I was making use of the resources that I had. But the main thing is that this survey looks nothing like the survey that I'm about to show you in Snap. So if I open up my Snap file, got my Travel With Us survey, do a quick print preview. So if you compare this print preview to that one, you can see, yes, I've got the same questions on the page, but what I don't have is any of the logos, the positioning and the layout is all completely different. What I've also got, I haven't got all the sort of introductions, all the thank you messages, etc. I've literally just got the sort of bare bones, the questions. And if there's questions on your external survey which you don't want to make use of in Snap, then there's no need to actually design those questions in Snap. So only input the questions which you want to make use of. The one thing I did do was just make sure that this did all fit on one page. And if my external survey was a 2-page survey, ideally make sure that the relevant questions appeared on the right page. Otherwise, it can just get a little bit confusing when you're trying to find things later on. Now, the big difference in terms of an externally designed survey is that we do an initial calibration of sorts from the design window. And rather than picking just 4 boxes, we're actually going to point to every single box, including the open-ended boxes. And to do that, we click on the Define External Questionnaire. And now I've already sort of done this effectively to save some time, because in a moment we're going to have to draw around all these different boxes. But it would be a case of clicking on the scan and pointing off to your TIFF file. That would then import the image like this. And you can see if I just click on question 1C and click on the word excellent, just zoom this in, you can see there is a box around the excellent, and likewise if I do it for good. But what I do just need to do is do the same for question 1A and 1B. So I'm going to zoom in one more time. I click on excellent, and I'm going to click on the create box. And if I just right click initially, I'm just going to make sure auto find is selected. So I'm going to draw around the excellent box, and you can see it's a little bit bigger than the actual box itself, and then just let go and it should find it. If it doesn't find it, as I said, just right click and make sure you've got auto find ticked. If I then press enter, now that I've drawn the first box, I can actually just click in the middle of good, and it knows that the box is the same size. Okay, and it's jumping from question to question to question, or answer to answer, should I say. And I said I've actually already done all the other tick boxes on that page. But if I come down to question 6, which is the first of my open-ended questions, just have to zoom out again and click on the draw around the box, a bit bigger than it is, and it should find it. If I then enter, now if I try and click in the middle of this next box, it's not going to find it because the box is a different size. So again, every time there's a new box size, you will need to redraw your box. Likewise for these smaller boxes. But now these next boxes are the same size, so I can just enter, click in the middle, enter, click in the middle. save what you've done, and then it's a case of just going back into the data entry window as before, and then we will just scan the survey in the normal way. So again, clicking on the plus and scanning that in as we have done all day today. So we've had a look at how to scan in survey setup in various formats today. We've used a variety of things to encourage neater handwritten responses and thereby achieving better recognition, such as those gridded boxes, patterns and pre-printed text. We've just had a quick look at how to scan in a survey that was designed outside of Snap. Let's just have a quick recap on some of the do's and don'ts of your project. So do make use of our scanning template, as that has got those additional question styles as well as the ready-made instructional introductions. Scanning projects are best suited to forms that are predominantly checkbox questions, so use these in place of open style questions whenever you can. If you do need to include some open-ended questions, then try and make use of those gridded open styles where possible. Always print from the PDF and never photocopy. And be careful what paper you use as well, because if you're doing double-sided paper and your paper's too thin, the responses on one side might end up affecting the boxes on the other side. Alternatively, too thick, and anytime you fold it, it's going to create a big sort of line across your paper. And too shiny, and the scanner will just reflect the sort of shininess back. Make sure you test your setup before you send out thousands of surveys. And finally, it's a good idea to make an archive of the survey once you have sent that survey out. That way, if anyone does inadvertently change the survey within Snap, you can always fall back to the archive. For the don'ts, once the form's been sent out, do not change anything. And as we've said, never photocopy things, as every time you photocopy something, the boxes are going to move a little bit, and also the boxes are going to get fainter and fainter. Try and use the same printer each time you are printing those PDFs, and consider whether staples are a good thing, because you will end up spending a lot of time destapling them. And finally, take care when folding your paper so it doesn't affect the accuracy of your scans. So be careful where the sort of fold appears. Make sure it doesn't appear across any of your boxes. And on that note, as we saw with my scans, make sure you give your scanner a good clean before you scan them in. So that covers everything I was planning on showing you today. Hopefully I've shown you how to go about running a successful scanning project, and also what to consider when deciding if a project is right for scanning. On screen now are quite a few QR codes which will take you off to our support hub pages. The first of which is an interactive tutorial which will take you through the entire process of creating a survey and scanning it back in. The next three cover the basic do's and don'ts of scanning, along with how to add pre-printed data to your questionnaire and how to scan in a survey that was created outside of Snap. And if you have got a spare 2 minutes, I'd be grateful if you'd complete our short survey about today's webinar. This can be accessed via the QR code on the right. I will also be sending an email in the next couple of days, which will include links off to these resources that I've got on screen now, and also a recording of today's webinar. Thank you for joining me, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.